Well, I think the first Premiership semi-final has lived up to the billing. We were hoping that we'd get two great semi-finals this weekend, one down, and I thought it was an absolute cracker. If you are looking to avoid the result of Northampton against Saracens, now is the time to click off the video. But what a game, and what a victory for the Northampton Saints, who will be heading to Twickenham next weekend, and a deserved victory as well, but Saracens absolutely played their part. Drop a comment down below. What do you make of the game? What did you think was the difference between these two teams? I've got my own theories, but let me know. And also like the video and subscribe to the channel as well, because getting right into it, for me, my kind of top line from this game was I felt like this match in 80 minutes of rugby displayed the difference between Northampton this year and previous years, and perhaps also displayed the difference between Saracens this year compared with previous years as well. And what I mean by that is early on in the game, Northampton had to absorb Saracens' pressure. Sarries were making it difficult for them. They were celebrating all those minor victories when they got a penalty or Northampton knocked it on. And it had a very Saracens feel to the first 15 minutes, roughly, when Saracens took a 6-0 lead. But Saints were able to absorb that pressure and then were able to get themselves back into the game, which I don't think would have necessarily been the case in years gone by. Another good example of that would also have been the try for Lewington in the second half, which brought it back to a 3-point game. I think in years gone by, those are the moments where Northampton would have maybe just crumbled or broke a little bit and Saracens would have grabbed hold of the game and been able to see it out. But this year, with this Northampton team, who are still a brilliant attacking team, they've got an edge, they've got a hardened defence. They just feel like they're a little bit more streetwise, maybe a bit more experienced as well, that when these moments come, they're able to get themselves through them. And on the flip side of that, I think you can say the same for Saracens as well. This is still a really good Saracens team. Overnight or in a season, they haven't gone from being the champions to not being any good, obviously, because they've got themselves into the top 4. And some of those great victories, I mean, I think of Harlequins at Tottenham, where they blew them away. I think of their away wins against Bristol and Bath towards the end of the season, where they squeezed the life out of those teams on the road, and you wondered if they could do the same here. They tried to do that in those opening stages, but then they just weren't quite as lethal. They weren't quite able to build pressure in the way that I think we've seen them do previously to teams at this stage of the season. And that's what I mean when I say it's maybe just a slightly different Saracens team. They have still been very good, but they're just not quite as machine-like maybe when it comes to the big moments, when it comes to knockout rugby as we've seen previously. That was kind of one of my big takeaways, I think, from watching this. Almost a confirmation of what we've seen throughout the year. We've always thought Northampton looked better positioned to maybe go all the way and win it. And we've always thought that Saracens, whilst having some great victories, maybe just don't look quite as ruthless as we've previously seen. But we needed to see it in a big knockout game. We got that tonight at the Gardens. And I think that is exactly what we saw. And in particular from Northampton, the biggest example of that, as I've mentioned already, was their physicality and up front. Their driving maul, but in particular, their scrum and the amount of penalties they won at the scrum. It would have been almost unfathomable, probably 12 months ago, to be sat here saying Northampton have won a home semi-final in the Premiership off the back of their scrum, dominating Saracens and building and getting loads of penalties. But that's exactly what it was. And they kicked their points as well. And it's huge credit, I think, to this Northampton team, to the coaches. They are just a far better all-round team this year. They've been the best team in the Premiership all season, hence the fact that they finished top, and they are heading to Twickenham. And I'm pleased for them and I'm pleased for the club. But overall, as I said at the start of the video, I thought it was a great semi-final, because it was, in fact, the last couple of weekends, having watched the Champions Cup final, having watched that game on the telly, is in these kind of moments, there is a tension, there's a physicality, there is an edge to these games that you can't replicate, and we don't get a lot of the rest of the time throughout the season and when we're watching matches, because there are so many moments that at the time you're thinking that could end up being a huge moment. Like there's the Jamie George disallowed try in the first half. There is the Alex Mitchell try where he was brilliant covering tackle from Gonzalez in the second half where he was just pushed into touch. There's the missed penalty from Finn Smith when he had an opportunity in that second half to extend the lead. All sorts of other moments as well, breakdown penalties and things, drop balls that get magnified and put under the microscope in this sort of game. It is what makes knockout rugby so compelling. And I thought this was compelling. And I think that's so important for the league as well. How often is it we get to the end of the season and we've got 2 semi-finals, but you kind of feel like you know which way they're going to go. And that was one of the most exciting things, I think, coming into this weekend, is we've got 2 semi-finals that you could genuinely see going either way. And I think we saw that tonight. I think Northampton overall were deserved winners. But Saracens, fair play to them for, in the end, making it a 2-point game, scoring the late try. And you're thinking, blimey, are we about to see one of the most miraculous late comebacks in a Premiership semi-final that we've ever seen? But as I said earlier, I do feel like those couple of moments, really, I suppose, after going 6-0 up for Saracens, after the Lewington try, which brought them back to within 3 points, there were these moments where you wondered whether they were about to take the semi-final by the scruff of the neck, that they just weren't quite able to, I think, in the way that previous Saracens teams have been able to do. And take your points. Again, speaking of kind of knockout rugby and what we saw in the Champions Cup, and again what we've seen tonight, take your points in the big games. Both teams pretty much did in this match, but Northampton in particular, when they were getting penalties in kickable positions, Finn Smith was saying he was having a pop at the post. You build the score, you build the pressure. It was brilliant. It was very, very good. I'll say a couple more on Saints, as they're the victors. It's hard to know where to begin, really, with individual players. I know Mitchell got player of the match. He was brilliant again. He has been brilliant all season. I think he's been the best 9 in the league. I think it's completely understandable how over the last year he's finally, Saints fans would say it was long overdue, become England's number 1. But we saw Tommy Freeman under the high ball. You saw, Tommy Freeman under the high ball. We saw George Furbank in the second half in particular starting to influence things in an attacking sense a lot more. You saw some of the other guys that maybe aren't as heralded, but I think have had a really positive impact on the team this year, in terms of Trevor Davison in the front row, Curtis Langdon, who surely has to go on that England tour to New Zealand this summer as well. It is a more all-round Northampton team in terms of personnel as well as the style of rugby. I guess those two things go hand in hand, really. You can't improve your forward pack without having better forwards within it and players improving and levelling them up in terms of a coaching point of view. And as for Sarries, how much is this the final line in the sand of an end of an era? They have been a team over the years that have been brilliant at regenerating and staying at the top. And we've wondered probably over the last few years of whether Sarries were finally kind of past that point. But with Farrell leaving, with the Vunipolas leaving, there's a couple of others as well. Quite what they look like going forward, I think, is fascinating. It is going to be one of the really, really interesting narratives when we get to the start of next season, which is a fair way off at the moment, with it not starting until the 20th of September or whatever it is. I think that was kind of all the points I wanted to get through in this video. As I say, there was a 15-minute period at the start of that game where I was like, this is Sarries. This is what Sarries do, because they were winning the small moments. They were celebrating those small moments as well, making noise, all those things that must get under your skin when you're playing against them. But Northampton were able to ride it out, and when their moments came, they were able to take them. And it wasn't a game where Northampton were cutting Saracens to pieces. I think actually both teams did a lot of really good stuff in this game. Even though Saracens lost, they were able to stop Northampton on quite a few occasions. I think a lot of the defensive work Saracens did made life really difficult for the Saints. But Northampton, even if you stop them, even if you pose a challenge in defence, they've got a forward pack now. They will take their points, and they're able to get over the line. And whoever they face in the final next week, and I think it's going to be a great final. I hope we have another brilliant semi-final tomorrow at the Rec between Bath and Sale. I suspect that we will, but we've certainly got things off to a bang. So comment down below, what did you make of it? Do you kind of agree with me that this was a game which in a way epitomised the difference in Northampton this year and how they've improved, and maybe the difference in Saracens and how they're just not quite as ruthless? They're still good, don't get me wrong, but they're not quite as ruthless in those big moments as we've seen them previously. Saracens fans, actually, one final point, I will stop in a second, one final point for Saracens actually, and what Saracens fans might say in the comments, is they messed it up on the final weekend. They messed it up at home against Sale, because not having a home semi-final at the StoneX, having to go to Franklin's Gardens makes a world of difference. And I think most of us would say, had Sarries got home advantage in the semi-finals, there'd be in another final. And then we're looking at a one-off game and we might be having a very different conversation. So it's funny how these small margins can change the whole complexion of things. But I will now leave it there. Comment down below, like the video, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the subscribe button. We've got summer tours coming up. It's going to be a busy summer of rugby, relatively busy anyway in terms of the internationals. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed to stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.